Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and can I thank all members for taking part in this debate today. I want to thank those that have spoken in support of the motion for the very measured way that they have engaged, the respectful way that they have engaged in this debate. I want to thank members who have indicated concerns, again, for the respectful way that they have done that. I think some of the language has been regrettable around cynical exploitation, playing politics. That isn't the case, and the attack on Sinn Féin by Claire Bailey and Jerry Carroll is something that I think is highly regrettable. Similarly, they used the same language against Sinn Féin that Sinn Féin have used in respect of those that support this motion, and I think that's regrettable. We need to debate this in a very sensitive way, a measured way. On the non-fatal disabilities, Sinn Féin accept that both lives matter. We accept both lives matter in many more circumstances, and it's about supporting both lives that's vitally important. So I do think it's important that we acknowledge the contributions that people have made, and I want to thank them for that. I want to thank the member for East Belfast, Joanne Bunting, for opening the debate and her powerful contribution and that of others. My appreciation to members that have spoken in support of the motion, but in particular I want to thank Robbie Butler and Rosemary Barton. I want to thank Patsy McGlone and Dolores Kelly for their support and the approach that they have been taking on this issue in advance of the debate today. This cross-party and cross-community approach is a demonstration of the shared values that we have. This issue is not a DUP issue. It is an issue for all of us. And Assembly members today, as in the past, when I worked with people like Pat Ramsey, Alban McGuinness, Danny Kennedy, and indeed the late Seamus Close, is something that we had common cause in and worked together on. It is extraordinary that the UK government should have included a provision in these abortion regulations that is years out of date and would be a regressive step and a backwards step in the campaign against discrimination and equality for people with disabilities. We have had the advent of the Disability Discrimination Act in 1995, the UK signing up to and ratifying the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2009, and yet here we are, having a law that invites us to view viable human beings that have non-fatal disabilities as less deserving of the protection of the law than viable human beings of the same age who are not disabled. We are dealing with a law that lays the foundations for fatal discrimination. Discrimination that says that someone's life can be ended because of their disability. Regulation 7(1)(b) and Regulation 13 are quite simply extraordinary, and it brings shame on the UK government and Westminster if it approves it later this month. It is enough to make any person with a non-fatal disability, like Heidi Crowter, or anyone who has such a person in their family, completely devastated. No one can spend time with Heidi or anyone with Down syndrome and feel that that would be acceptable. I had the pleasure, as colleagues have said, to speak with Heidi, a remarkable woman who celebrates her birthday on the 4th of July, Independence Day. And there she is, campaigning for her equality of treatment and for freedom for people like her that have the chance of being born with Down syndrome. Her life has been one full of joy and happiness, due to get married later this month to James. And when we listen to Heidi speaking of being deeply hurt and offended by this legislation, that she is viewed as less valued as other people, that should make all of us moved with compassion and compelled to take action. Many of us will know people in these circumstances. The family of the oldest member in society in the UK and Ireland, George, celebrated his 76th birthday yesterday. And his family have given support to this motion, saying, "We love our wee brother. He has brought us so much love and joy. He has had a great life." My own great-uncle, my father's uncle Samuel, had Down syndrome. He lived for 57 years, and he had a love for animals. My father speaks about his tremendous work ethic on the family farm and what joy he brought to that family. I never had the opportunity to meet him. The idea that Down syndrome is some huge problem that should be addressed by abortion is chilling, and it suggests a complete lack of interest in how people with Down syndrome and their families see the world. The problems with Regulation 7 and 13, however, do not just pertain to what they do, but also the way in which they have been developed. The story of these regulations has been one of a litany of constitutional abuses that no self-respecting democracy should ever countenance. The regulations are the result of a vote to change abortion law in Northern Ireland, in which the votes of actual MPs that represent the people of Northern Ireland were silenced by the votes of other MPs, none of whom represent this place. The legislation pushed through via an amendment to an unrelated bill, subject to accelerated procedure, should never have been the case. The original amendment, tabled and commended by Claire Bailey in the name of Stella Creasy, was so incoherent that rather than being amended, the House of Lords totally rewrote it, and then the entire new provision was sent back to MPs, and they only had 17 minutes worth of a fragmented debate which took place around Brexit and passed a vote, but not specifically on that amendment from the House of Lords, grouped with wider amendments. I'll give way to Mr Lunn.
I thank the member for giving way. He could perhaps help me decide what way I intend to vote on the DUP motion. If he would explain to us what is the DUP position here. Is it the intention, which I gathered from Mrs Bunting's excellent speech, to concentrate on the one clause 71B and try and get that changed? Or is it what Mrs Cameron appeared to let out of the bag, which is frankly a much wider discussion about the Abortion Act in total? If you could clarify that for me, it would help a lot.
I will. I'm going to address that point just as I conclude. But he does raise a valid point, and one that I can understand why he makes. Up until this point, it was Parliament that had treated Northern Ireland badly, but from here on in, it has been the Conservative government that have made matters worse. In the first instance, they had a consultation on regulations much shorter than the usual 12 weeks, especially on controversial topics. It lasted 6 weeks, only 4 of those days took place outside of a general election campaign. In the second instance, they completely ignored the fact that 79% of respondents said, please don't do this. Then the Secretary of State proceeded to develop regulations in a way that has undermined devolution to a greater extent than Parliament actually required. That point has been spelt out in a legal opinion by one of our leading constitutional lawyers, David Schofield QC. It would have been bad enough for the Secretary of State to compound the undermining of devolution in a context where the Assembly was suspended, but has continued with that approach even after the restoration of devolution. And if that isn't bad enough, the body charged by the UK Parliament for checking these regulations uniquely had no representation from Northern Ireland. That meant that the regulations, which only relate to Northern Ireland, were checked by a UK Parliament body consisting of English, Welsh and Scottish parliamentarians. And there's also other concerns in respect of these regulations. Regulation 4 provides access to abortion to 24 weeks on the same basis as GB. And Dolores Kelly outlined concerns in respect of that aspect, and I don't intend to repeat them. The way in which the abortion regulations have been developed by the UK Parliament and the UK Government have treated Northern Ireland with contempt. No member of this Assembly would tolerate the Executive or an Executive Minister acting in this way. In this context, it doesn't seem appropriate for this Assembly to go out of its way to infer that it's prepared to accept other aspects of these regulations beyond Regulation 7 and 13, when the manner of their development as a whole has involved meting out to Northern Ireland such a litany of constitutional abuses. I'll give way briefly, Christopher.
Giving way. I ask sincerely, does the member take any responsibility for the passage of this legislation being as a result of failed leadership in Northern Ireland?
Well, let me just deal with that point. We are where we are today. Claire made this point. We can go over what happened in the past. Members are asked to deal with the circumstances today. Viewing this through a prism of wanting to be politically critical of a party and its approach in the past, whether it's right or not, does a disservice to what you're being asked to consider today. And I know that there are members that have wrestled with how they should vote on this matter. I understand the sincere considerations that you have in terms of giving your support to this motion. Today is not about me. It's not about my party. The issue's much too important for that. And I know not everyone will agree with my position, and I may not agree with your position. But we should all agree that as elected representatives of the people, we take responsibility for reflecting the values of our society here in this Assembly and seek to reach common ground. I appeal to members, if you can't listen to me, hear the voice of Heidi Crowter and people like her. I ask members to support the motion as originally tabled.